Are therapists allowed to have boundaries? Let's talk about it. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of The Couch Reimagined. And this is not going to be a long one. This is going to be a quick one, but it's a very, very much needed conversation, but one that we need to be having more frequently, not inside of our private therapy chats, not inside of our private group chats, but we need to be talking about it more publicly, I think. And that's, are therapists allowed to have boundaries? Let's talk about it. One of the things that I keep seeing online is it's almost like therapists and clients are going at it online with therapists having boundaries around how they run their business. Many things are happening to make therapy happen for folks, for the therapist and for the client. And there are some things that I do really want us to understand in this conversation today. Therapists, one, are in business. Clients may not know that. Clients are seeking a service, particularly for issues that they are experiencing. Understandable. We want that. We need that. I'm a client myself and I'm a therapist, so I'm speaking from both sides, right? The thing that is not always evident when you're going into the field of mental health is how much it takes for a mental health business to actually run. The difference between what we can see from a business perspective when it comes to therapists is we're seeing an individual work mostly for themselves, right? We're seeing them as individuals showing up, providing a service, getting paid for it. So it's a super transactional experience at times. What we might not see when we go into a hospital, say we go into the hospital, they have a clinic, we're not seeing the individual as the person who runs the business. We're seeing that hospital as a big corporation. So a lot of times when you are working with an individual solopreneur therapist, that therapist takes the heat for everything. But if you're going into a corporation company, then that therapist doesn't necessarily look like the face of the business, if that makes sense. So a lot of times, a lot of the heat is placed on that solopreneur around the boundaries that they choose to set in their business. So again, what I want to reiterate is therapists are running a business. I mean, a business that has bank accounts, LLCs attached to them, PLLCs, tax identification numbers, taxes that they are liable for, ethics that they're liable for. So when you hear a therapist say that they've charged a cancellation fee or a no-show fee, that's a part of company policy. The same as if you go to the airport and you're not at your gate by a certain time and they close the door. That's company policy. And here's the thing. We are a little bit more considerate and understanding when you have an emergency, and we know that, and so we may make, allowances at times. Each therapist is going to use their own discretion to be able to dictate whether they've applied a fee, they've applied a rate or not. That's the liberty that we have as solopreneurs. However, when you go to the airport and you're trying to get home because there's a crisis, or you're trying to get home to memorialize someone, at that gate for safety reasons, they really don't care about that. And they're closing that gate whether you make it to your destination for that family member or not, because that's company policy, that's safety policy. The same similar thing happens on the therapist side of things. We're trying to keep ourselves boundaried, safe, ethical, and we're trying to make sure that we are taking care of our needs in the ways that we help you understand how you need to take care of your needs. So when we're on threads, social media, talking about these fees, it's a very, very, very nuanced conversation. That's not one where you can just kind of apply a blanket statement and understanding to it, right? So when we talk about boundaries and if therapists are allowed to have boundaries, part of the boundaries are no-show fees, cancellation fees. These things are put in place to help protect the therapist in business. Okay, so there are some things that may not be always understood when you're coming in seeking a service with that particular individual. it's a little bit more likely for us to understand how things run from a business perspective when we're working with corporations, big companies. I think we lose sight of the experience being business related as well when we're working with that individual or when we're struggling and suffering emotionally and mentally. One of the other things that I hear is that it's mental health. We should be charging for mental health. I 1000% agree. And we don't live in a world where that's happening. So in order for therapists to keep a business going in order to pay their own bills, they have to do things and put things in place that actually help protect them in that way. And one of the things that happens, we're trying to teach you how to have boundaries. We're trying to model to you how to actually speak up for yourself, how to advocate for yourself. And it's a little bit hypocritical or contradictory for us not to do the same for ourselves. Okay, so that's the therapist perspective of things. When you think about the client perspective of things, you're thinking about the crisis that you're trying to manage. You're thinking about the things that you have to get to. You just want somebody to listen and support you through that, because this isn't something that's within your control sometimes. And it's important that you work with a therapist who understands that and asks that question up front. It is totally okay as a client to ask the question of, what's your cancellation policy? What's your no-show policy? What's your late fee? Those kinds of things. It's okay to ask those questions when you are choosing a therapist to work with, because you want to make sure you're working with somebody that you have a good enough relationship with, that if they know you had to cancel because you had to get your child from daycare because they're sick, that they are going to make allowances for you, or that they have it written in their policy somewhere that there's a certain number of allowances available. And there's an understanding there because you are building an intimate relationship with these people, right? So that, from the client side of things, is what I feel like I'm hearing. Clients just want to be heard. Clients just want to feel supported. They don't all the time want to feel like this is a transactional relationship. So the onus now is on the therapist. Is we've got to do better as therapists. We've got to make sure that while we run a business, that we also know how to manage a relationship with people who need our support. So it can't be all or nothing either way. It can't be, I'm running a business and this is the way it's going to be, or totally this is the relationship and I don't want anybody mad at me so I can't charge any fees. It can't be that way either. There has to be a middle path and a meeting where we are talking about how those two things can be blended together to best support the therapist and best support the client and our work together. And how can we make this doable for everybody so that we're not getting taken advantage of and clients don't feel like they're getting taken advantage of? So that we're not running a transactional business where we are okay to miss and be late, but they're not okay to miss and be late. So the therapist also has some responsibility to also be consistent. If we're going to model boundaries, we also have to be consistent in boundary with the time as well. If we're going to cancel on people, then we have to make sure that we have something in place that also accommodates them as well. And that's just fair across the board, right? So maybe if you are a therapist and you're like really strict on your no-show policies, but you miss a lot, you might want to go back to the drawing board and think about a middle path. So I give 2 allowances, or I give 3 allowances because I know that I need those allowances as well. There's a way for this to all work together without us fighting and looking like we're enemies and at odds with each other. Because that's never the way mental health space is supposed to be. It's supposed to be harmonious and supportive both ways, right? So I think we've really got to understand and try to find the nuance in conversations also, because a lot of this just looks like black and white, kind of like very, very extreme thoughts around how things should be done. And people have had some very horrible experiences with therapists, and they have views about it, rightfully so. But also, y'all, therapists have had some very horrible experiences with people coming in for services. And they've got to protect themselves, rightfully so. So how do we make this as harmonious as we can without operating from the same spaces that oppress us outside of that space? Does that make sense? So let's talk more about it. I don't know where these conversations will continue to have, but I know I'm willing to have them on my platform. So where are we going to have these conversations? Where is the nuance going to be where are we going to navigate the nuance? Where are we going to bring the nuance in the room, right? Instead of talking about what should happen, what should not happen. Every particular business is going to run and operate differently. Every client is going to need a different thing. Every therapist is going to need a different thing for their business model. And it's up to us to work together to figure out what that looks like. This is why it's not okay to blindly accept what another therapist says they do in their practice. Because what they do in their practice for their clients might not work with you and your clients. This is also why it's not okay as clients to say, well, my therapist did this, why aren't you doing this? Because all of us aren't created the same and all of us don't operate the same. Just like we don't expect you to be the same client that we're used to work with or usually working with. Okay, so it can go both ways. And I think we're fighting and at odds with each other sometimes because both of us are needing support and not sure quite how to ask for that or get that in the climate that we live in or the society that we live in. So we're misplacing anger a lot of times. We're misplacing frustration a lot of times. And that leads us to kind of keep going at it with each other, and that's not the solution either. So let's continue the conversation. But what I want you to take away from this is, as a therapist and as a client, both people are correct. Therapists should be charging fees as it supports them in their business. Clients should also be questioning those fees if it feels like it's kind of encroaching on their safety or their comfort. And we should be meeting in the middle to talk about how that can best be supported and whether or not those people are a good fit for each other. Because sometimes if you have a client who feels like they should not be paying cancellation fees, they may not be the client for you. If you have a therapist that feels like they need to charge those fees, that may not be the therapist for you. And those things are totally okay. Okay? So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. And let's keep having the conversation. Tell me what y'all want to talk about. If you are not already subscribed, please subscribe. If you are a person who has particular questions or things that you want me to talk about, don't hesitate to reach out to me. This particular episode is sponsored and brought to you by My Therapy Cards. It's a card deck that I created to help support Black and brown communities in navigating things like insight, mindset work, habits, triggers, so that they can get to the place where they're actually doing some meaningful work and working through some of the things that continuously keep them stuck. You can find out about my therapy cards at mytherapycards.shop. And if you want to follow me for more, subscribe, set your notifications, and meet me back here next time. Thank you. I'll talk to y'all later.